They must make you like to turn a page. Bim, bim, bim. What these guys do, they say, well, in blah, 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 da, 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 there was a porch chair. The flies were walking around.
Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about the meme itself, the Communist Manifesto. We're gonna do a book review episode on it. So the Communist Manifesto, I have read it, I wouldn't say recently, but I wanted to make a video on it, mainly because there are some faults with the book that I want to address. Now, first of all, before we start off, I'm not gonna take it from the ideological side. My ideas on communism, I think we'll have to do a separate video on that. Will be expressed somewhere else. For now, let's just kind of review the book from the artistic part. So kind of just put away all the ideological whatever, and let's just review the book for the piece of art it is. Piece of art with big quotation, whatever, you know. At the end of the day, it might just be a piece of art. And second of all, what did I want to say? Oh yeah, that we are in a new room, and this is like my OG room where I stayed before Corona, right? You can kind of have a look around and shit. So we're gonna be probably staying here until Corona doesn't come back, and it probably will, so we might just find ourselves soon enough in the other room. But, you know, apart from that, everything will just remain normal, and let's get right into the book review. So to start off, the Communist Manifesto, I don't have it in print form, I have it only in digital form. It's pretty fucking thin. I expected the book to be much longer. After reading the first 5 or 6 pages, I kind of understood, and I kind of was happy that it's so short, right? So the book is quite short. I believe on an iPhone it is 96 pages long. Right, that is pretty short. I don't know if Marx was running out of paper or something while writing it, or his parents didn't want to fund him anymore, so he just quickly drew an ending. But yeah, you know, the book is quite short, so it's a short read. I have done it during a boring lesson in school. I've just read it all, and then I was like, okay, I read the Communist Manifesto. Second of all, the book itself, it's boring. It's boring to say at least, mainly because it uses such complex language. And you might say like, okay, well, that was the 19th, I think it was the 19th, that was the 19th century, they all used that type of language. Not really. I mean, those were the academia languages, right? And I do understand that Marx had to probably upkeep like some academia standard, and he couldn't just go freelance. But the book nonetheless is boring. And you know, you say that about a textbook, right? A textbook is boring. But you always have to think about like what audience the book is supposed to be targeted for, right? If you find a textbook boring, it's probably not from a subject you're very passionate about, right? Because otherwise you would find it quite interesting. If a physics student picks up a physics textbook, the text is complicated, but he is able to go through it because he's interested in the topic. If, however, a history student does the same action, he will be bored by the textbook because it's not so interesting for him. The same is with the Communist Manifesto. If a fellow academia man or a fellow intellectual picks up the book itself will be of pleasure to him. But if a worker or somebody of the lower caste picks up the book will simply be not understandable. And since Marx was supposed to be this grand guy or daddy of people, and he was supposed to unite the working class and just fight off somebody, I don't fucking know who, you kind of gotta think where your audience is. You know, those turtleneck intellectuals, they're not gonna do much in terms of a revolution. They're actually the bourgeoisie you're trying to turn over. Or, yeah, overthrow, yeah, not turn over. Overthrow. But for the casual worker, this book doesn't really provide anything. This book doesn't really, since he cannot understand it, that's the first thing, it's too complex for him. And second of all, I kind of understood like the words of the book, but I didn't quite understand the point. So Marx pretty much begins with explaining like there is now communism in Europe, which is just as interesting as it sounds. And then he continues to ramble on about some worker rights and some capitalism or some shit. And then he talks about how the revolution is inevitable, and every worker should pick himself and herself up and revolt. And it's like, okay, but what exactly, how is the worker persuaded to do so? Just because somebody made up communism, the worker isn't persuaded. Of course, there are mentions of the workers having like this and that, but remember, this is during the age of when people were still expected to work for like 24 hours until they died. Today, for the modern worker, the book has no sense at all, because he's just like, well, I'm getting paid, I'm doing work that I agreed to, why would I want a communist manifesto? So my theory is, and this is gonna be a strong claim, that most of the people who claim they've read the Communist Manifesto haven't read it or don't understand it, because it's a book that's really just not suitable for our time. And I do not mean that in a bad way. Look, sometimes you have books which are suitable for a certain time period. They describe a problem that is only in a certain time period. Okay, it is exactly as a book which describes, imagine a computer manual from the 80s, okay? That book today is not relevant, right? It's a book that's outdated, but for that current era, the book was good. The book was helpful to the reader, to the audience, but today for the computer audience, even for the same audience, the book isn't helpful. Just as the book Communist Manifesto might have been helpful to somebody in that year, or years, today it's outdated. It is not good, and no modern version or whatever will encapsulate it. Somebody would have to do like a new Communist Manifesto, summing up all the problems and why we need communism. But like, come on, those people can barely type a tweet. They're not gonna type an entire book. So I don't think we should worry about that. But I think it would be a very interesting, for any anarcho-capitalists out there, I think it would be a very interesting, like, entrepreneur idea to just rewrite the Communist Manifesto and put some new salty sprinkle and call it your work. Alright, I think you can even do that, because Marx is dead for like more than 50 years. I'm not sure about this. Check the legality, and if it works, then I don't know, just publish your new Communist Manifesto, I guess. And that's all, you know. So to sum it up, I do not recommend the book. It's boring, and there are much better books which I would read instead of the Communist Manifesto, and we are going to be talking about them in the next edition of the Book Club. See you soon.
Bim bim bim, bim bim bim, bim bim bim, bim bim bim.